I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. The driver of the car is a murderer, and what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing.
Our president needs to speak from his heart and bring us together, because right now we are a nation divided.
Kim Jong-un appeared to back down on his nuclear threats. The United States says it's still open to negotiation over North Korea's missile program.
We continue to be interested in finding a way to get to dialogue, but that's up to him.
Alabama's Republican Senate special election is heading to a runoff. As expected, former District Judge Roy Moore, he will face current Senator Luther Strange.
This is what it takes to get something approved today. This is what we will bring it down to.
The bureaucracy in the United States at this point always gets in the way and stalls major infrastructure. That's what the president wants to cut.
A group of Indiana state troopers were patrolling the fairgrounds when they decided it was a great time to break out the classic song, The Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy.
Us down. That's a way to wake up in the morning.
Yep.
And a great shot of New York City. Is it ever not crowded in the city? It's amazing. Even at 7 in the morning.
The city never sleeps.
No.
When we come in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, still a lot of people out.
People are eating. People are
Well,
drinking.
I drive in on the weekends, so it's amazing. I mean, that's when the action's happening, when I come in about 4 in the morning.
Because when people come to New York City on vacation, what they do is they don't want to miss anything.
Right.
So it's like they got the hotel, they're not paying a lot for it, but I got New York City, I've got to explore everything.
A lot of places to see. Well, good morning to all of you. Happy Tuesday morning.
Good morning.
We've got a lot of news to get to.
Oh, man, there was a wild press conference yesterday in the lobby of Trump Tower, just about 5 blocks from where we're sitting right here. As you can see, the President of the United States exiting the Golden Elevator. He's flanked by Elaine Chao, his Transportation Secretary, and Gary Cohn, his economic advisor, who he wanted some questions about infrastructure, didn't get any. Also, you got Steve Mnuchin, the money guy. What's interesting is, according to Axios this morning, the president had that press availability, and he lashed out because he felt that the media criticism about his initial comments of Charlottesville were so wrong, he was going to fight back campaign style, and if you missed it, he did. Watch.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious and it was horrible. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is. Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides. You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
So what he said there was, of course, famously, there were the neo-Nazis, the KKK, the white supremacists, and then on the other side you had the Antifa, is that how you pronounce it? Groups dressed in black with the helmets and things like that. But he said, in addition, on one side you had people who were just upset that they were taking down the statue of Robert E. Lee and renaming the park. That was
that not everyone there was out to hurt someone or was evil. And I do think that's a good point to make. Calling out these groups for what they are, for bigotry and hatred, that is incredibly important. And
Which he did.
Which he did. I think a lot of people felt like he wasn't consistent in that. He came out hard Monday, and yesterday he wasn't as strong on that. And I think he needs to continue to be as hard as he can because no one should stand for that.
He doubled down on both sides' culpability.
So we, of course, asked you what you think, and here's what Richard said. In an email to us, he says, Trump was right. Violence in the name of a cause is how the evil make a point when their cause is weak.
This is coming in from Dorothy. Says President Trump tried to explain the whole situation in Charlottesville, yet no matter what he says, he will be condemned.
Tom writes, it wasn't eloquent, but it was pure Trump and common sense. It takes two to fight. Something else the president brought up, and that was regarding, remember, this all started with the renaming of that park. Robert E. Lee Park is now Emancipation Park, I believe, down in Charlottesville. And he takes a look at what is going on regarding the renaming of the park and the taking down of the statues and the toppling of the statues. And he wonders, from his presidential perch, what's next?
You take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Of course, this raises so many questions.
Well, that's what a lot of people are saying. Look, there are good people on both sides of this debate. That's why we're having it. And it's an important one to have in this country. Do you keep these statues up? Do you put them down? What does that say about our history? Is that the way to move forward as a country? Laura Ingraham, editor, of course, in chief of Life Zet, she's been talking about this, very passionate. Here are her thoughts on this issue.
I understand that there's this newfound outrage and level of offense that it has reached this fever pitch about these statues. I mean, I think a lot of people have driven by these statues probably for decades and never thought twice about them. But now they've become a political symbol. And if it's a symbol that represents the racist past or any vestige of a racist past of the South, then they're going to be able to say, well, then that has to go too. I don't know how far they want to take it. Maybe they'll take it to certain books that they think are offensive or certain speakers on college campuses who are offensive. I think we have to ask the question, what next? How are we going to heal as a nation, condemn that which is evil, and then come together as a country?
That's so key right there. We need to heal.
Sure. And you look at the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. Remember, America was a much different place back in the olden days. How many, dozens, I believe dozens of them, were slave owners at one time or another. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson as well. You look at the comments of a senior correspondent from the Federalist, a man by the name of Daniel Davidson, that is to say. He was on the channel last night, and he took a look at the statutes, but he sees something bigger in this debate. Watch this.
I think a lot of people on the right, conservatives on the right, who are saying, yes, maybe we should move these statues to a museum, miss the point. This is not about the Confederacy. Exactly. This is not about the Civil War. This is about political power, and it's about a small group of people on the left trying to exert outsized influence on American politics by following in the footsteps of Mao, of the armed thugs in the Weimar Republic, of the Taliban. This is these are tactics that are well known. You start by tearing down statues and burning books, and eventually you go after people.
It's that similar argument made of it's a slippery slope. Where does it stop? Right. At what point do you completely erase history? How do we move on? How do we learn from our mistakes as a nation if it's all erased?
Right. In Baltimore, the mayor there said there are statues in Baltimore. What we're going to do is we're going to move them to cemeteries where there are Confederate dead buried. But then apparently the town council said, no, let's not do that. Let's just go ahead and destroy them. So that's what they're going to do in Baltimore.
What do you guys think? I mean, we've been debating this all morning long. Do you think that these statues should go down? Do you think they should stay up for history's sake? Let us know at friends@foxnews.com.
And how do we come together as a country? I keep going back to what Laura Ingraham said. That is so key right now. Because we have so many major issues we need to face. Here's another one that's right in our plate. We need to conquer this one before we can.
And how do you educate this next generation coming up, right? How do you teach them the right way, that we are all Americans, that history is a part of who we are, but we are better for that? How do you make sure that that is instilled in the next generation coming up?
But where do you draw the line? If somebody was a slave owner back in those days, do they become, a pariah? In which case, do they rename Washington, D.C.? What happens to all of that stuff when you think about it in the big picture? That is the debate that people are having right now.
That's a good question. All right, a lot of other news we're following this morning. Julian is here with some headlines. Good morning, Julian.
That's right. Good morning. Let's begin with a Fox News alert. Alabama's Republican special election is heading to a runoff. Former state Supreme Court Justice Roy Moore earning 41% of the vote, short of the 50% needed for an outright victory. He'll face current Senator Luther Strange in the runoff next month. The winner of the runoff heads to the general election in December to fill Attorney General Jeff Sessions' seat. Roy Moore will join us live in the next hour, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And in Utah, Provo Mayor John Curtis wins the GOP nomination in the special congressional primary. He's considered the favorite over Democrat Kathy Allen to fill Jason Chaffetz's vacated seat. That election is in November. A somber day ahead in Charlottesville, Virginia. Heather Heyer, the woman killed during violent riots last week, will be laid to rest. Heyer was protesting against white supremacists when she was hit by a car that was driven into a crowd. The 32-year-old was a Charlottesville native and worked as a legal assistant. 19 others were hurt in that attack. A key event in the case of the accused Chelsea bomber won't be heard in court. Ahmaud Rahimi's shootout with New Jersey police before his arrest. The judge ruled it would be prejudicial because there is a separate trial for the shooting. But Rahimi's blood-soaked journal, where he referred to bombs in your streets, can be used as evidence. He's accused of setting off this explosion in New York City last year, injuring 31 people. A SpaceX rocket blasting off from Kennedy Space Center.
3, 2, 1.
The rocket loaded with supplies for the 6 astronauts on the International Space Station. Moments ago, the capsule successfully docking. Among the cargo is a supercomputer and a freezer full of ice cream. Because what else would you need when you're going to space?
You got to have the
extra headlines.
Yes,
Send it back to you guys.
Exactly. You know, at the Museum of Air History, the Smithsonian, they've got the freeze-dried, which is kind of good, but nothing beats real ice cream.
I know, but hey, if that's your only option, I'm going to vote for the ice cream. I'm going to take it.
You take what you can get, Jillian.
All right.
That's absolutely right. Thanks so much.
Jillian.
All right, coming up, brand new details surfacing on that meeting on the tarmac in, I believe it was Phoenix, between Loretta Lynch, then Attorney General, and former President Bill Clinton. President Trump's legal counsel, Jay Sekulow, here with what they have just uncovered, and you're going to want to hear it.
And what effect will the Trump presidency have on Republicans running for re-election in 2018? RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel weighs in. Coming up next.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Well, the president's approval rating now hovering at about 41%, with critics claiming that those numbers are normally an election predictor and could spell doom for the GOP.
But should Republicans really assume that what normally happens will happen in this not-so-normal year? Let's talk to Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
There's nothing normal about politics these days, is there?
There's nothing normal or predictable about politics, and certainly almost a year and a half out from the midterms, there's no way to predict what's going to happen. As the RNC chair, we're already laying the groundwork for our get out the vote and our data collection and how we're going to turn out our universe of voters, but we don't know what the major issues are going to be.
Sure, and when you look at the comments from the president and then President-elect Trump, it's like, hey, don't trust the polls. They were wrong in November.
They were wrong in November. I'm from Michigan. Let me just tell you, they were wrong in Michigan. So I don't think you can trust the polls. I do think there's some indicators right now in the economy that if the economy keeps going the way it's going, that we're going to have a good midterm. 16-year low in unemployment. You have 1 million new jobs created under President Trump. Right. I mean, labor participation rates are up, incomes are up. These are really good indicators. If we have a strong, humming economy going into the midterms, I think we'll win.
Well, a lot of that goes back to results, right? What can Republicans do on Capitol Hill? And you just look at the past 6 months. A lot of the Republicans, Todd and I travel the country going to diners, talking to voters. They're angry. They're frustrated. They feel like they've been duped, like they've been promised if they had control of Congress, they would be able to get things passed, like health care, for example, getting rid of Obamacare. They haven't been able to do that. Does that concern you as someone who runs the RNC?
It does, and I hear that too. I hear that from voters. Hey, you campaigned on this. You've got to fulfill your campaign promises. That's certainly a message I take to the leaders in Washington. The president's very aware of that. But we're only in the first quarter of the game. We've got a while to get these things done. These are huge issues. But the president's leading on things like deregulation, on energy independence, on national security, with the great Supreme Court Justice and Judge Gorsuch. All these things, and then you look at the economy and how well that's doing.
Is the Congress doing enough to help him?
I think they are. They've got to keep humming. I don't think you can walk away. You can't say, okay, well, we couldn't get that done.
I don't think he would say that, though.
Yeah.
One thing that we are seeing a lot.
I have to be for everybody.
That's right. When we do these diner tours, one thing that we see a lot of is a preference for a non-traditional candidate like President Trump. As you are scouring the nation for the next people that you're going to put up on the Republican side for Congress, are you gravitating more toward that non-traditional candidate?
Well, there are 10 Senate Democrats in states where President Trump won, and the candidates that are coming forward in those states are non-traditional candidates. And the one message I think that came out of the November election and President Trump's election is people want change in Washington. Right. The status quo is not working. They want to see things get done. Obamacare's failing. It's not okay to just say, all right, this is the best we can do. So people are looking for real change in Washington, and I think you'll see that again in the candidates that come forward and are elected through the primaries and put through in the midterms.
All right.
What about Mitch McConnell quickly? A lot of people are saying he needs to go for things to happen.
I think Senator McConnell, I mean, you look at the 49 votes he got in the Senate. I don't know what he could have done to get Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and John McCain. I think
John McCain was shocking, though.
John McCain was shocking, I think. But I think Senator McConnell did the best he could. If we've got to deliver on tax reform and other things.
Ronna McDaniel, thank you very much for being here.
Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so
All
much.
right.
All right, call it President Trump's policy in action. Suspected members of the brutal MS-13 gang now being rounded up and arrested in the Midwest.
And a high school baseball player is suing his coach for making him ride the bench. That bench right there. Apparently that is now considered bullying. An explanation coming up.
Welcome back. 24 minutes after the hour, some quick headlines. Congressman Luis Gutierrez arrested during a sit-in at the White House while defending Obama-era immigration policies. He and about 25 others were handcuffed after refusing to move. Gutierrez was released after paying a $50 fine and spending 2 hours behind bars. And Kid Rock still hasn't confirmed whether he's going to make that Michigan Senate run, but he just got a major endorsement. It wasn't from the GOAT. It was from former New York Governor George Pataki, saying on Twitter, Kid Rock is the kind of candidate the GOP needs right now. Pataki, a pretty big player formerly in Republican politics. Interesting.
Kid Rock keeping us guessing. Thank you, Todd. All right, is being benched the same as being bullied? Well, a former high school student thinks that that's the case, and now he is suing the school district and the varsity baseball coach for it.
The suit states, quote, for over 4 months and 14 games, Robbie Lopez has been benched and not given the opportunity to show his offensive or defensive capabilities. Goes on to call this a form of harassment. Question is, will the judge agree?
Well, here to break it all down, attorney Emily Campagno. Emily, good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
So you say this suit is absolutely ridiculous. You cannot claim it's bullying if simply because the coach doesn't put you into play.
Absolutely. So usually I can find legal merit to both sides in a lawsuit, but here, frankly, I can't. So this father is arguing that coach's discretion essentially is akin to bullying. And he's pointing to a case that just came out of South Carolina in which a high school cheerleader was found to have been subjected to pervasive bullying at the hands of her coach. Now, that consisted of a pattern of derogatory comments about her private body parts, crowds jeering at her. You know, she cried herself to sleep every night. The father here acknowledges it was simply for being benched, and yet he claims this is more egregious and is seeking more money than that cheerleading case. No judge or jury will agree.
You know, as a father of 3 children who went through sports their entire lives, sometimes you do get frustrated with the coach who invariably doesn't put your kid in all the time so the kid can get spotted by the college talent scouts and get the free ride to college. That's just the father talking right here. But nonetheless, sometimes there are reasons why kids don't get put in, but is the remedy suing the coach?
Well, that's a great point. So they even acknowledge in the complaint, this game is supposed to be fun. So what is the remedy for loss of fun? How do you qualify that for damages? Now, this father has posted YouTube videos of his son, his highlight reel, as it were, on air. So I feel like to him, it's probably the lost opportunity of an MLB career.
Right.
But again, no judge is going to agree. And his son is probably more scarred from this national attention than he was from being benched.
I was just going to say, sometimes failure can be the best thing for kids growing up. I mean, I'll never forget the time I was in a swim meet and got last place. I was so far behind that everyone was cheering for me. They were just so happy that I finished. But
we get to go home.
We're all
Thanks,
done.
Abby.
But these are things that are good for kids to go through because you develop strength and you realize you aren't perfect at everything, and it takes hard work. Does this distract, though, Emily, from the real problems that we face in this country when it comes to bullying?
It absolutely does. To me, the most unfortunate aspect about this is that it detracts from and dilutes instances of actual bullying that does deserve our national attention and that does deserve legal remedies for it. So unfortunately, this overzealous father is he's really detracting from the larger conversation.
Surely, and in the lawsuit, as you know, Emily, the father says that the game is supposed to be fun. But what's the legal remedy for not having fun at the game?
Exactly, exactly. And you know, the zip code where this family is from, it's the 11th most expensive zip code in the United States. And unfortunately, what this is teaching that child is that when you have an issue of manufactured adversity and potentially competition, the answer is to run to the courts. The answer is to complain. This father complained about a fundraising game that the school invited his son to. And those are the lessons this child is learning, not the positive lessons from healthy competition.
Yeah, that's well said. Emily Compagno, great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, still coming up on the show, brand new details surfacing on that meeting on a Phoenix tarmac between Loretta Lynch and President Bill Clinton. President Trump's legal counsel, Jay Sekulow, here with what they have just discovered about that meeting.
And take a close look. The police are after this alleged criminal, and apparently so are the fashion police.
Ooh.
Did you see that infraction? We'll explain. Speaking of the law, the attorney for the President of the United States and chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, joins us right now from Franklin, Tennessee, one of about the prettiest towns in the whole wide world. Jay, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hey, let's talk about this. New developments with the FBI regarding a Freedom of Information request about the Bill Clinton and then Attorney General Loretta Lynch meeting on the tarmac at Sky Harbor in Phoenix before it all hit the fan. What exactly is going on with looking for the documents?
So here's what happened. We filed a Freedom of Information Act request to both the FBI and the Department of Justice. The FBI came back with a letter last July saying we have no documents relevant to your inquiry. The Department of Justice didn't even respond. And when they didn't respond, we filed a lawsuit in federal court in Washington, D.C., and the court issued an order demanding that the Department of Justice produce documents. They produced those documents just about a week ago, Steve, and in those documents, lo and behold, was communications between the FBI and the Department of Justice. The very documents that the FBI said did not exist were actually produced in the request that we got, the court order we got from the district court judge. Now, it focused on a timeline of what took place inside the Department of Justice as the Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton meeting was getting public. And I mean, and by the way, the FBI correspondence, the email from the Department of Justice to the FBI included an email to the chief of staff for James Comey, who, remember, when he made his testimony, said he was shocked and outraged at what happened, and that was the reason he went public on the Hillary Clinton matter, as they called it. Well, take it a step further now. After that disclosure came out, it obviously became clear to us that there were documents, in fact, between the FBI and the Department of Justice. And I'm holding in my hand a letter that I received yesterday where, in a rather unprecedented move, the FBI has reopened that FOIA investigation to produce relevant documents to the inquiry that we now know exist. That doesn't happen. And so this was a positive sign. But the biggest issue is not so much what we've gotten so far, which is significant. It shows communication to the Department of Justice and the FBI, Department of Justice, and the White House. We're all involved in this Clinton-Lynch meeting how to message and handle it, but there was a 3-page email produced, which they redacted completely. It's 3 blank pages that were the, quote, talking points, and they refused to release those. So we're back in federal court on that document. But, Steve, again, and everybody, this was, I'm holding my hands up. I don't do this often as a prop, but I'll just tell you, you don't get many of these in your legal career where the FBI reversed itself on this FOIA request. And a lot of it was because it became public what was going on. Of course, we contacted them and told them, hey, you're telling us there's no documents. We have documents. So you've got to, you know, someone's not telling the truth there. Someone's lying.
Got caught.
And apparently the FBI was the one. Yeah.
But Jay, lawyer to lawyer here, when you receive a request from another lawyer, you have an obligation, the oath that you swore when you became a lawyer, to produce the evidence that is requested. Now, granted, you can redact for attorney-client privilege and things of that nature,
sure,
but this is an out-and-out lie based upon what you just said.
Well, here's what they said. By letter dated October 21st, we advise you that it had located no responsive documents to your inquiry. And then they say, subsequently, the Department of Justice produced documents which communicated that between the FBI and the DOJ. So now we're going back and we're going to find those documents. Now the question is going to be, and this will be the interesting aspect of this, they'll find the documents. Are they going to produce them? Because finding them is one thing, and as you know, getting them produced is another. So we're prepared, if necessary, to go back to federal court. These admissions or these releases are what they call rolling documents. So we're going back to court to get the redacted version. But it's a 3-page blank email, completely redacted except for the names. But it included, here's an interesting note, it included at the time a lawyer named Hegworth, who was, in fact, the one of the counsel to the a special counsel or senior counsel to FBI, Attorney General Lynch. So it was one of her lawyers. Now this matter of investigating the whole situation between Lynch and former President Clinton, as you know, is right now before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Guess who is the deputy counsel to the minority ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee? The same lawyer that was involved in the production and the messaging on this meeting. So that presents talking about from a lawyer to lawyer, a real potential, not potential, a real conflict of interest issue, and she shouldn't be involved in the case at all. And frankly, team, this is just the start of this one, and we're finally getting the documents.
This is a lot of new information. Jay Sekulow, great to have you on this morning.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
You bet. That's an eye-opener. Well, Jillian is joining us right now. She's got a whole bunch of headlines for us.
Hey, that's right, I do. Good morning. Let's get you caught up on what you need to know before you leave the house. Major gang raids resulting in the arrest of 13 people across Ohio and Indiana. Those people, mostly illegal immigrants, are accused of having ties to the violent gang known as MS-13. One of those investigators of the operation joined us earlier.
This is an extremely violent gang, and anywhere that it exists is a problem. I think that there are probably plenty of people in Columbus who didn't know that MS-13 was here before yesterday, but for those people and communities who were being extorted by its members, it was a very big problem.
The mayor of Miami-Dade County, Florida, Carlos Jimenez, is joining us coming up at 8:30. Stay tuned for that. This afternoon, Attorney General Sessions will join him in Florida, praising the county for being the first jurisdiction to officially drop its sanctuary city status. An American flag reduced to ashes, and now police are searching for the culprit. The charred remains of the once proud flag, all that's left in front of this Massachusetts repair shop. Police say someone intentionally lit it on fire, but so far, no arrests have been made. There is some good news, though. A neighboring store already donated a new flag to replace it. Forget about feeding the homeless. Some California residents are now being asked to take them in, to house them. LA County officials have given the green light for a program that would give $75,000 to homeowners to build a second structure on their own property, or they could get $50,000 to update an existing one. He's got a knack for knocking off pharmacies, and apparently he's got absolutely no style. Missouri cops are on the hunt for a thief they call the Jorts Bandit. Officers tweeting these photos of the man wearing jean shorts, also known as jorts, while robbing a Walgreens for the second time. They made light of the situation, tweeting, quote, his disregard for the law is as offensive as his disregard for fashion trends. And another tweet urging residents to call 911 or the fashion police if they can identify him. I was sitting in the back before I came out here cracking up reading this story and scrolling through their Twitter feed to see the comments, and people are going crazy about the Jorts Bandit.
What's wrong with jorts?
It does beg the question. who has
I've never
worn
heard of
jorts.
jorts before.
What?
Had
No,
jorts.
they're just as bad as
Jean
these
shorts.
pants that have the zipper. It's like I'm warm. I need to take the bottom of my pants off, and now they're shorts.
Kind of like shants, but they're jeans.
Shants?
Yeah, it's like a mix between a short and a pant.
Steve's mind is blown right now.
Holy crap! I know what a skort is.
Okay.
I have a hunch that Janice Dean, at some point in the 80s, had jean shorts.
What about man-prees? Is that what we're calling them?
Whoa.
Like
Let's not
capris,
go there,
but
Janice.
Is that what you guys do?
No.
You wear like these
Steve and
pants
I
that are
do not.
man-prees?
So much wrong with that.
It goes with the man bun, I suppose.
And the merce.
Oh my gosh, let's get to the weather.
Okay, take it away, Janice.
We're losing it here. Let's take a look across the country. Someone told me this morning they think, summer is a bust. It's not over yet, okay? It is a little cooler than average across the Northeast and the Great Lakes and the upper Midwest. Across the south, that's where it's a little sultry. It's feeling like summer across the south. We could see the potential for large hail, damaging winds, and isolated tornadoes across the central U.S. today. Much the same forecast that we saw yesterday. And we are also watching Hurricane Gert. It is off the coast, not going to affect anyone except if you're surfing. If you're a good surfer, you'll enjoy the waves, but stay out of the water if you're not a good swimmer because there's going to be very dangerous rip currents. All right, what other fashion faux pas can we talk about this morning?
Good question.
I don't know.
Well,
I guess, Janice, how long can we wear white for? That's a good question. Because we're all white.
I guess until Labor Day, that's what they say.
No.
I don't know. I wear white whenever I
You
want
wear it
to.
always, yes.
And there's always winter white. I mean, that's confusing.
Steve and I were just talking about this before the show.
The winter white.
Very important issues.
Yes, thank you, Janice.
You got it.
Thanks, JD. All right, coming up, the Taliban warning President Trump, don't send more troops to Afghanistan. Should the president listen? The man who killed Osama bin Laden, Rob O'Neill's going to weigh in on that next.
And this is a remarkable story. They were fired for faking documents and avoiding taxes. But this morning, hundreds of former IRS employees are back on the job. Got to stick around for that.
Welcome back. About 50 minutes out of the top of the hour. Time for your news by the numbers. First, $10 million. That is how much hardworking taxpayers are shelling out to pay to clean up the North Dakota pipeline protest. Activists leaving behind piles of garbage after camping out for months to protest the environmental dangers. Next, $70 million. That's how much this high school football stadium cost in Katy, Texas. The dedication ceremony is tomorrow, and the first game is on the 31st. Wow, it's beautiful. And finally, 13%. That's how much of the Twitter traffic on college campuses is dominated by guess who? Oh, yes, Fox News. A collegestats.org study shows Fox is the #1 most shared publisher in those areas. Look at that. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Abby. Meanwhile, the Taliban warning President Trump against sending more troops to Afghanistan. In an open letter to our commander-in-chief, the Taliban saying, quote, previous experiences have shown that sending more troops to Afghanistan will not result in anything other than further destruction of American military and economical might. Americans are no longer in a position to fight this never-ending war. Here to weigh in on it, somebody who fought in that war, former Navy SEAL, Fox News contributor, and the man who killed Osama bin Laden, Rob O'Neill. Rob, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So what do you think about the Taliban giving the president advice?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting way to do it now because they realize he's not a typical politician. They realize that he is talking to his generals and saying he inherited a mess. And if you'll notice what they say in the letter is they kind of tell him, you've inherited this and there's no reason to keep going and it's a non-winnable war and things like that. And that, one thing that really stuck out to me, though, is they said, we're not really your problem, which some of my teammates and I have been saying for a long time, that if we weren't there fighting the Taliban, we're not going to hear from them here. And I don't think more troops is going to do anything unless you truly reinvade, take all the bases that you've already given up to the Taliban and realize the problems in places like the federally assigned tribal area and Quetta, Pakistan. Sure. That's where the bad guys are. That's where Haqqani is. We don't need to do that. We're not going to rebuild the place. We've been trying to train them up for like about 15 or 16 years now. It hasn't worked. The Afghans have have never really won a war in their own country, which tells you a lot about the Afghans. We will need to maintain a presence in a place like Bagram, where we'll keep some Air Force, some Army, some forces, and just kind of hang out there, guard yourself. And the problem with the Taliban is that obviously they've helped Al-Qaeda before for attacks on the mainland. If they start to group up like that, hit them again from Bagram with some air power for 3 or 4 days, thump them like that, and then go back and hang out at Bagram. There's no reason to try to nation build a group of people who do not want to be rebuilt.
Right, exactly. Interesting. You and the Taliban are agreeing on that. No more troops at this point.
I won't go that far.
Well,
but I don't think any more troops right now.
Right. What about this? There's a new story out from the Department of State. Rex Tillerson says that ISIS is posing one of the biggest threats to religious freedom because of the genocide regarding the Yazidis, Christians over there, and the Shia Muslims. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not exactly breaking news. This started back in Iraq when everything fell apart. And not didn't start in Iraq, just the most recent version of modern genocide started then. And it's a fight again between the Sunni and the Shia. And now the Sunni took power in that vacuum in the form of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and then ISIS. They started executing Sunnis who they considered apostates. They started executing all the Shia. You can see the horrible videos of that. They started hunting down the Yazidis, killing the men, keeping the women and children as sex slaves. And, that's obviously a really, really bad thing. There's modern-day slavery, modern-day sex slave trading, things like that. And this all comes back to that version of Wahhabism, that version of Sunni Islam that's a problem. And it's not and, the Iraqi army just took Mosul back, and they've got a lot of Iranian Shia militia and Iranian Revolutionary Guard there, and they're doing the same thing to the Sunnis. So it's the ideological civil war that's been going on there for thousands of years, and it's going to keep going until we get into countries that stop preaching the hate. We got to talk to the clerics that are preaching the hate, try to get them out of there and realize where the problem is. It's the ideology. But I mean, just to come out and say, hey, this is happening. Yeah, it's happening, and it's real.
It is indeed. All right. Rob O'Neill, the Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden. Rob, thanks for joining us today from Chicago.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.
You bet. All right, 10 minutes before the top of the hour, still ahead, they were fired for faking documents and dodging taxes. But this morning, hundreds of former IRS employees back on the job. A Tea Partier who was targeted by the IRS is going to react to that news coming up live next.
213. That's how many employees the IRS rehired after they were dismissed for everything from falsifying documents to avoiding their own taxes. So how does stuff like this ever happen in the first place at the IRS? Joining me now, a Tea Partier targeted by the IRS, CEO of Tea Party Patriots, Jenny Beth Martin. Jenny, before we begin, how does this happen in the first place?
Well, it happens because there is incompetent leadership at the top of the IRS. John Koskinen, who's the IRS commissioner, he should have been impeached last year by Congress. He was not. It's time for President Trump to fire him and remove him. He's not doing what he needs to do as the IRS commissioner, which is to restore the trust of the American people with the IRS.
I'm trying to have a fair and balanced conversation in my own head about this. Were these individuals rehired because there's literally nobody else who can do these jobs?
I can't imagine that there's no one else who can work at the IRS who did not, haven't committed crimes, including theft, falsifying documents, other egregious and irresponsible activity. It's completely wrong. And if we file improper paperwork or falsify documents to the IRS, we're going to go to jail. We don't need people who have done that working at the IRS.
And when we're talking about your own personal financial documents, this is an insight into your financial soul. Also, Social Security numbers, a number of data points that you don't want freely out there in society, yet these individuals are entrusted with your information, and 213 of them doing this.
Yeah, the IRS is a very intimidating agency because they have so much power and authority. Now, whether we like the IRS, whether we like the way the tax system is set up, there has to be a level of trust when an agency has that much authority between the people it's collecting the money from. And right now it's gone. From the Tea Party targeting to the rehiring of people who've committed crimes, it's completely gone. The IRS commissioner needs to be fired, and I hope that President Trump will do that.
Now, even though the IRS commissioner has only 3 more months left on his 5-year term, you think President Trump should get rid of him now and then worry 3 months from now about hiring a new person?
Well, I absolutely do. And the fact is, the president ran on a campaign to drain the swamp. This is a swampy activity. This is a swampy action. And this is one way to send a clear message to the American public that he's serious about draining the swamp. The other thing is that the president could do, by the way, to help drain the swamp is to end the illegal congressional exemption from Obamacare. We have people in this government in Washington, D.C. who are breaking the law and getting rehired by the IRS, who are living outside the law in Congress with an illegal exemption and subsidy from Obamacare. It's time to drain the swamp.
It's unbelievable. Talk about swamp. This is it. Thank you so very much for being here. We appreciate your insight. Jenny Beth Martin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Todd.
Coming up next, Newt Gingrich live at the top of the hour. Don't want to miss that.